This is our second class in the series about the passage in the Talmud that offers the 6 questions that they ask you when you pass on into the next world. And the question came up when we learned last time together. These are great ethical ideals. These are certainly useful matters for consideration, but why is this relevant to passing on into the next world? How does this teach you how to die, so to speak? And excuse me, some wisdom is offered by the Maharal of Prague. Though the Maharal of Prague is usually associated with the golem that he may or may not have formed using the Kabbalistic Book of Formation. But the Maharal was an absolutely essential linchpin figure in articulating some of the ideas in the Torah in a very, very profound and often very simple way. And when he gets his hands on this particular passage in the Talmud about the 6 questions they ask you when you die, he says, when a person comes from this world into the world of that is not physical, bilti gashmi, when you come into the world which is not physical, then the judgment is about whether or not this person was drawn towards the spiritual, what's called in his language the sikhli, also in this world of the physical, what he calls the gashmi. Ki elyonim heim pshutim, because in the upper worlds they're simple. Ve'ein behem gashmut, there's no physicality there. L'chach, therefore, kasher ha'adam nifrad min ha'olam ha'gashmi, therefore when a person separates from the physical world, leo nichnas b'mechitzat nidalim, to enter into this world of what is called the world of nivdalim, separated beings, meaning separated from the physical level of soul. Then the person is questioned and is asked that in the world that they are coming from, if they were also drawn towards the spiritual. And then a person, it would be fitting for that person to enter into the world of souls when they come there. So these are questions that point us towards the reality that this world into which we enter after we pass from the physical world is a world of soul. It's a world of seichel. It's a world of mind and soul. And to transition into that world would require that we be living that way in this world. If we didn't, then the filter would catch us. We wouldn't be able to pass through. If we were living too physically in this world or with the wrong orientations in this world, we wouldn't fit into that world. We wouldn't have the capacity to move and to exist into that world in any kind of sustainable way. And it could be parenthetically that when we talk about hell or purgatory or Gehenna or whatever, we talk about the kind of the clarification or purification period that our tradition does talk about after we die is not really necessarily about punishment. It's really about refining us to the point where we can fit through the filter. It's about removing those physicalities that might be in the way of transitioning into that more spiritual world. Not that Judaism is anti-physical at all. You'll see that one of these 6 questions is where you involve with being fruitful and multiplying. And also the first question, which is about business. Did you do business? But the question is, how did you do those? Did you do those in a way that is continues to be oriented towards the level or towards an orientation of soul? Or did you do those things in a way that really does capitulate to the physicality of those things or makes the physicality of them the point, as it were? So it's pointed out by the Maharal that the first question, did you do business faithfully, is really asking about whether you were able to avoid the unnecessary physical associations of business, and the particular hardwired assumption that we talked about a little bit last time about the assumption of direct cause and effect in terms of masao matan, that doing business is the way I succeed in my business and the way that I flourish in my business is only in directly a result of how I do business and how I physically make money or how I physically produce. And the danger of that is that it is, again, pointing a person towards the physical world as the place where their sustenance happens. And then a person might become more and more enmeshed or entrenched into the physical world as a way to generate that kind of income or that kind of abundance. And that, in addition to leading people towards unethical behaviors, because they might think that they then have to cut corners in order to to make more profit for themselves. It also, again, inclines an orientation where I'm spending my day and my time thinking that this is the way that my life, my sustenance will happen, and therefore I need to devote all my attention to it, as opposed to assuming and understanding God gives, Hashem will give me as Hashem will give me. Of course, I'm going to make effort, but I'm also going to sever the absolute 100% assumption about the direct connection between how I do business and how I succeed in the world. And that therefore gives me the opening, even as I'm doing business, to know that there is more. There's a bigger picture happening. There's a bigger story happening, bigger sense of cause and effect than just how I invest and how I build and how I buy and how I do commerce. So of course, the Torah, as we've mentioned, is not ascetic. It doesn't call for an ascetic lifestyle. It wants us to engage in commerce. It wants us to engage in reproduction, and it wants us to have pleasure and joy, and it wants us to eat good food and celebrate. It just wants us to do it in a way that does not get distracted by the physicality of those experiences, doesn't get over enmeshed in the physicality of those experiences at the expense of the spirituality of those experiences. So many of our physical relationships, whether it's to money or whether it's to food or whether it's to sex, are mitigated by practices in the Jewish tradition that slow down the process and try to call attention to consciousness around those acts in order to keep them more conscious and more soulful and more spiritual. So we say blessings before and after we eat. We have laws around commerce. We have practices around sexuality. All of these things are ways that, again, the pure physicality of an experience could be mitigated by a sense of a larger principle and a larger story. That was the first question about, did you do business faithfully? Did you do business in the context of faith? Did you do business in the context of a larger story? The second question they ask you is, did you kavata itim laTorah? Did you establish set times for Torah? And the Maharal, who we started to talk about at the beginning of this recording, he says that this shows your proper orientation, in the sense that when you have to establish something, you establish times for Torah. The business happens, he says, be'emunah. To make something kavua, to make something established, shows that that's a priority for you. And of course, you notice that when you're scheduling and making your calendar, the things that are negotiable in the face of other things. What are the things that no matter what, you will not skip this thing? Those indicate priority. Of course, there's exceptions, or maybe there are not exceptions, but it seems like there's exceptions, that you have this meeting and of course you're going to break it because this opportunity comes along. It would be amazing if we were breaking our commitments to our business and commerce engagements in order to take opportunities for spirit and for soul, and not the opposite. Whereas it feels oftentimes that we have good ideas about how we want to practice and whatever that may be, and meditate and learn and engage and connect, and then something comes along and it demands our attention and says, I'm sorry, I have to cancel today because I have this business meeting that I can't miss this meeting. And of course it's understandable, and I'm not saying this is any kind of critique of anybody more than myself. I also have this, and I have a very severe predilection towards sort of business panic that oftentimes compels me to cancel and to ignore the things that I need really for my neshama, for the sake of earning money in the world, or for doing commerce in the world. And that doesn't always work out well, and I often resent it anyway, which is not a good combination of factors. So this is something to put in mind, that when I'm thinking about what I want to convey out, what do I want to establish, what do I want to be a thing which is non-negotiable and permanent and ongoing and scheduled every week, what are the things that I schedule, and trying to imagine for ourselves what would happen if a challenge to that schedule came along. What would I say? Am I able to say, no, I'm sorry, I can't meet with you, that's my time for meditation? I'd be happy to meet with you half an hour later. That's a pretty incredible and powerful assertion of one's orientation towards the spiritual and towards the level of soul, more so than the level of the physical world. So these are some thoughts. We'll pick up further when we speak again. I hope this is helpful. I'm very glad to have had the opportunity to study this Maharal with you, I think he's on the right track of pointing us towards all these questions, reminding us what we're doing here and how we are, how if we're going to transition to the next world in a smooth way, we need to start living that way in this world and living towards a level of an orientation around soul and spirit, and not just towards our physical existences. See you next time. Thanks.